My name's Dominic. I'm Dominic C. There's lots of Dominics on Blink. So just CC one of us. We all know each other, and eventually your bug gets routed through the overlay network of Dominics to the right person. So I think we should do introductions. I'm in Tokyo, work for Google. I'm hacking on custom elements. Ask me anything you like about custom elements.
Hi, I'm Hayato Ito. I'm working on Shadow DOM implementation, and I also became a spec editor of Shadow DOM. So, yeah, I'm happy to help Dimitri with Shadow DOM spec. And I rewrote more than 70% of Shadow DOM spec in this quarter to make sure model and data structure are clearly defined to enjoy the new spec.
So I'm working on, I'm monitor, working on Google, and implementing HTML imports. By the way, web components consist of 3 parts. One is custom element Shadow DOM, and the last one is HTML import. So that's all.
I'm Takashi. I'm working on Shadow DOM style related things. So today I'm very excited in Elliot's slide presentation. It's very fun. Yeah, that's all.
Hi, I'm Yuta, and I joined recently, and I'm working on the W3C testing of Shadow DOM.
And also templates. You help with templates as well, right? So Yuta is our testing man right now. Actually, a little more things. I'm going to say I'm Dimitri, and I work on my components, but these guys need more introduction because Marita-san wrote actually a lot of code related to Shadow DOM as well, and Sakamoto-san has changed a lot of things about how style resolution works for the better, and Yuta brought sanity to our testing strategy. And and Hayata-san is, of course, the inimitable events person. So he's the only person in the world who knows how Shadow DOM works with events. So should something bad happen, we're screwed. And of course, Dominic is the man in charge of custom elements. Thanks to him, custom elements are on trunk and behind flag. So yay. So this is, I'm going to do my best imitation of the Iraqi information minister. This is not a very important talk, okay? We just thought it would be good for you guys to know the team, and there's no major announcements. We just wanted to kind of give an update of what's happening. And I think I'll try to begin with the spec world, and we'll move on to the actual implementation. Every person can have their own little thing. So we are implementing this thing based on a set of specs. Marita-san mentioned them. We're actually trying to figure out what to do with the specs because, as you know, one of the parts of the web components called templates has magically disappeared. There is no longer a spec for that because it moved into HTML Living Standard. It was a magic act. It's like that rabbit thing, except it turned into a bear or something. I don't know. I don't know what animal HTML spec is. It's probably crocodile. I have no idea. But anyway, a dinosaur. No, okay. We're done with analogies. So we're actually trying to do the same thing with the majority of the specs because the more we look at them, the more we realize that they're not standalone things, and there is way too many things that in the specs that go like approximately like this. Take this part of HTML spec, apply this patch to it, and run it now. And there's like HTML imports is 90% monkey patches of HTML spec. And so our plan right now is to go talk to Hixie and go talk to Ane and try to integrate the majority of the specs into the bigger parts of the deal, parts of the spec. DOM core specifically, this is for Shadow DOM. majority of it. And this is what Hayato-san spent most of the time doing this quarter, is he took my verbose and lavishly appointed writing and turned it into an incredibly dry and very mechanical set of definition that actually makes sense. And it basically made it ready for integration into DOM spec. Because what he's done is he used all the definitions and he extended definitions in a way that fit integrally nicely with the DOM spec. And then parts of the shadow DOM spec will go into plural HTML spec, because I don't think DOM core spec should talk about content element and and shadow element and things like that. And we're probably going to do the same thing with HTML imports, because HTML imports really does not stand on its own as a spec. We don't know what to do with custom elements. I think we'll just try to look some more. So that's where we are. At this point, custom elements spec is probably in the most robust state as it was compared to other specs. And it's pretty much, I think we're going to try and push it to last call in the working group within a week or so. By the way, I've been saying within a week or so for the last 2 months now for the spec, but we're hoping that this one is this time is the charm. Nth time is the charm. Is that the way it works? Okay. And so that's the spec update. Do you want to talk about custom elements now, implementation?
So in a week or so, we're hoping you won't be saying in a week or so. I'm sold. I should add that any questions, comments, etc., let's just take them from the floor anytime. We can make this interactive discussion, might be more interesting. Support for other vendors. That's a good question. I can talk about custom elements. Mozilla has an implementation in Firefox behind a flag, if you can work out their inscrutable flag system. Is it called document.register in there? Yeah, so you search for document and register and you'll find it in there. It's pretty old. The spec did not survive contact with the enemy being real web developers. And so what they've implemented is pretty radically different to where we are now. But they've just been spending their implementation cycles on other things, and we expect them to loop back and catch up. All the feedback we're getting from them is pretty positive. And I think it sounds like Apple's waiting for other people to go first, and Microsoft gives, they playing their cards close to their chest as they usually do.
I heard that Opera's on board.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good point. Maybe as we talk about the other things, we can talk about where other vendors are at. It's interesting you mentioned specs, and Hayato-san took your spec and beat it into shape through good definitions. It's kind of analogous to code. If you have the right abstractions, the code becomes easy. So if you have good definitions in a spec, the spec becomes easy very short. Not easy. Beautiful looking and apparently succinct. Yeah. Yeah, so the implementation of custom elements is, as we said, it's behind a flag. It's basically complete with a couple of exceptions. One being really minutiae about what sort of exception you get out of document.register, because this thing effectively only has one method as an entry point. Might slightly differ. And if you use them and HTML imports together, that will do something, but not the spec behavior. And in general, they seem pretty useful and robust. I'll just add some color about how I tackled implementing these things. And one thing that you won't see, yeah.
Before you do that, I may be the only one in the room with this question, but can you give us the 30-second overview? I understand this stuff a little bit.
Okay, good point.
Less context.
Yeah, let me give you some context. What is custom elements? It's helpful to understand how these specs break down. So web components are all these things designed to work together, but they're really quite useful independently. So I'll just give you the custom elements view of the world. Thank you for reminding me. This is a good point. Okay, so we know from looking at the web that web developers boldly just write these random tags, and they get HTML unknown element, which in terms of methods and properties is just the same as HTML element, doesn't add anything. And then they jump through all these hoops after the fact to gussy them up with their own API. And they might hack on the prototype chain of these things or stick methods and properties on the instances of these elements. But this is a bad game to be playing. It's inefficient and unreliable, etc. So with custom elements, there's a new method on document called register, and it takes a couple of arguments. The first one is a custom element name type, custom element type. It's a string, contains a dash, is basically a requirement on what's a valid type name. And the second argument is this map of options, just like a JavaScript object, and you pass a prototype in there. And then when users write a tag with a matching type name, x dash, you name it, I always like to think of like verticals that will never get into the HTML spec. So the proctology appointment scheduler, x dash that. So when they write that in markup, we will, when we're returning a wrapper for this thing that would have been HTML unknown elements, we'll actually put the prototype that the author provided on the prototype chain. And so that can have all the methods you want, like move later or next available slot or whatever. And there is a set of 4 callbacks called Lifecycle Callbacks that you can additionally specify. They tell you the browser's creating one of these elements, like the parser rolled over it and it's creating one. So that's like basically you use this as your constructor. But it's all wired up to be consistent, which is the problem with doing this in an ad hoc way in JavaScript. So if you create it with create element, or if you create it, if the parser creates it because you said in your HTML or whatever means you create this element, you will get this callback. There's one callback for attribute changed, and there's a callback for you're going into the document, it's called entered view, and you're coming out of the document, it's called left view. So like entered view, if you're doing animations or something, you'll set up your request animation frame, and left view, you'll stop scheduling this thing. Yes? So that's a question. Does that mean the document has to have a default view? You can use custom elements in a document that doesn't have a default view, and you'll get the created and attribute change callbacks, but you just won't get the entered and left view callbacks. So those ones are really like you're going to set up some state to present some stuff. So that's what custom elements is in a nutshell. Over time, the spec has evolved to have fewer and fewer restrictions. The only thing we look at the prototype for today is to decide whether that custom element type name should be interpreted as an HTML tag name or an SVG tag name. So as long as you are hooking ultimately off HTML element or SVG element, you're fine. But you can play lots of games with that. So there's another kind of custom element that we call a type extension. If you pass in that second options bucket field called extends, and you name a tag name, then that's going to be your tag name. And the way you create one of these custom elements in markup is by saying is equals attribute. So let's say hypothetically there's no dialog implementation and you want to polyfill it. You could do document.register x-polyfill-dialog and pass in a prototype that you made up with the dialog methods like showModal, and you have an extends option in there saying extends dialog. And then if the author writes dialog is equals x-polyfill-dialog, we'll create a type extension custom element with the dialog tag name. So the reason why there's this bifurcation into type extensions and not is so that authors don't squat. They know if they're doing something that may ultimately conflict with HTML minting a name in that namespace. That's why we force you to have the dashes in there. So what was the question? Oh yeah, so what do we enforce? Not very much. So if you made this call and set up your polyfilled dialog and you had HTML element on your prototype chain, but your own implementation approximation of dialog, and then the user agent came along and shipped dialog, what you would get when the script is running your polyfilled dialog is the underlying type of that element would be an HTML dialog. Okay, so if you .called some of HTML dialog's native methods, it would understand when it's unwrapping that object that, hey, this is really this type of the pointer, and it would be okay. But from the point of view of the rest of the script, they will see your hacked up prototype that points straight to HTML element, doesn't have the user agent HTML dialog element on there, just has your one. So the restrictions are few, and you can play games. Like if you could use a type extension of video, but delete all of video's API by passing in this bogus prototype that skips over video and just points to HTML element. Yeah, we probably don't want people to do that, but it's the web, so we're going to give them the power, and people will experiment and blow off their feet, and then whoever is left with feet wins.
So you basically implement like MathML, and then the browser implements MathML.
Yeah, basically you could. So the question was, can you implement MathML? Yeah, you can do all sorts of interesting things implemented on top of this. I think we're going to see a lot of creativity with people experimenting. We'll learn what the patterns are. Anyway, I was going to share one little implementation trick that you won't see because it's not in the tree. I got a lot of mileage when I was implementing this by taking the V8 DOM window shell CPP, I think it's called. It's got the thing that sets up the window object really early on. And I just have this local patch where I create custom elements for like every tag name. And then I just run all the layout tests and see what crashes. And it's fascinating what Blink does in its, innermost inner workings. Like we had crazy crashes where you're like undoing, cutting some custom elements and stuff like that. So if you're hacking on DOM related stuff and probably hacking on anything, you can find some analogous situation. I think it's great just to leverage the layout tests or whatever in that way. Just hack the user agent up to do something extremely stressful. All right, so that's it for custom elements. Yay.
So let me talk about HTML imports. It's designed for the modular system for web components. So that the author can define custom elements in separate HTML5, and the user can import it to the main HTML document. It's kind of like iframe, but there are some noticeable difference. One is that the script tag in the import run on the context of the main document instead of the separate wind object. Another one is the style sheet is loaded into the main document as well, like script run on the main document. So the component author can define script and style sheet for their own custom element and define the custom element itself in separate file. Then it's available, and then import it to main document so that the user can use it. And the imports is implemented as a link tag with rel equal import instead of like style sheet or something like that. So you can, by doing so, we can implement. You can use imports. That's how HTML imports work. So talking about implementation, it's almost done, but we just changed how it works. So it's kind of half done now. And also, because it's kind of destructive change, unlike Shadow DOM or I'm not sure how it. Oh, the point is that we need to talk about Polymer, which is a JavaScript library implementing polyfill of web components, because we are all working on behind the flag, but web developer want to play with it without the implementation available. So our implementation strategy is to implement it behind flag and turn it on and modify Polymer to make it use the native implementation and see how it works. But HTML imports is kind of hard to disable. So I have separate flag from the other experimentable features and have its own flag. So if we want to try it, see the about flags, no, about what is it called? About flags, Chrome something, Chrome flags page, and search HTML import, then there is a flag for that. That's all. Any questions, right?
I have questions because, so what about the synchronous versus asynchronous load?
Okay, so it's tricky question. So what's the synchronous? For example, you are thinking about script tag. The parser blocks on the script tag until the script is loaded and executed. HTML imports behaves kind of similar, but it's more like what is it called? Style sheet. So it doesn't block the parser, but once the parser finds the script tag, it blocks until imports are loaded. Because the script, so that the script can rely on the import definition. But one tricky thing is that if you create the link element dynamically and append it from JavaScript, it's loaded asynchronously. So you need to be careful if you want to do that. But fortunately, we have the load event, so we can add the event listener for waiting the imports to be loaded. So there's basically two ways to use it. Just write the link tag in HTML and use it safely, or you can create the dynamically create the link element and wait the load event to make it available. Does that make sense? All right.
There's a lot in there. I'll repeat the question as I heard it. You guys are all awesome.
Yes.
And pat on the back. I couldn't agree more. So the question was about roadmaps. Where is it in Blink? Where is it in W3C? When will it be available to the web? Because you think it's like the last feature. It's the last piece of the puzzle. That's an apt comment. This gives authors lots of power, and it will take pressure off some weird feature requirements. Like the proctologists can go back to their own working group, and they can just use custom elements for all the things they want. So I don't know. Do we want a capsule summary of where all of the things are? Custom elements are implemented behind a flag. The bug is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9. You can star that for updates. We are literally patches away from being done. Mozilla has an implementation that's out of date. They are probably months away from being done. The spec has a pretty stable draft. It is weeks away from trying to enter last call, which is a roll of that dice. So that's custom elements in a nutshell. When do I think it'll be widely available on the web? I think by the end of next year in a browser, you'll be able to use it not behind a flag. I'd estimate like 60% chance of that happening. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, it's basically these are not different in any way than any other feature in Blink, so they have to go through the same process, and they have to conform to guidelines. And as soon as the spec enters last call and exits it into call for implementations, then we can ship it. Or as soon as Mozilla has something implemented, whichever comes first. The situation is slightly more different for Shadow DOM and other specs because we're actually going to integrate them into living standards, which means that they probably will ship sooner because living standards has a slightly less high bar for call flow for implementations, and that's what we're doing.
Yes. So, what can I do as someone who works in standards and at W3C to find a way through what appears to be simply standards process constipation to unblock this for you?
My swag at this is we've come this far, and Dmitry has vaulted over many hurdles. I don't understand why specs languish in last call for so long, but they do. So since that's where custom elements is, that's the pertinent question right now.
And who else this is happening in the web app store group?
No, not so much, right? There's no last call out there.
What?
Alex is saying, with his W3C hat on, there's smoke coming out of his kitchen. Should he go in there and fight a fire? And is there smoke coming out of the WhatWG kitchen? And it seems, from my point of view, that the answer is no.
No, WhatWG doesn't have that.
So his question is, what should W3C do differently?
Adopt the living standard? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's a good question.
Well, let me ask the question a different way then. So it appears that from the perspective of Blink, we are willing to ship things which don't have consensus at the same level between the living standards and the HTML standards. Why are we implicitly setting the bar differently?
It's a good question.
It's a good question.
I use that. You can't say that.
I can't use it. Okay. The bar is different for a living standard because it's a different standards body essentially, and we recognize it as a standards body. And we run a risk of some vendors not participating in the standards body, and that is sad. But maybe it's something we should consider. Maybe we should move custom elements to WhatWG. I don't know. It's. I really hoped, Microsoft doesn't participate in WhatWG, so I really hoped that they would participate with us. And so far, I've been working with them, and they seemed responsive and filed bugs and even helped us be part of the spec. Tony was a co-editor of the HTML templates, so I kind of want them to be part of the picture. I don't want to, divorce them.
Have you communicated to them that we would be willing to move the forum to a place that they can't participate
If you don't do this, no. It's a good question. I mean, it's a good point. Maybe we should. But I don't think there's like any reaction that, I think it's a nice threat, but I don't think there's any sensible reaction that you can get.
As a web developer, right? I'm hugely invested in the idea that I would be able to get to use these things soon. And as a Polymer, I'm hugely excited by that, as it gives me the ability to do it now. But end of next year, 60% chance sounds pretty tough.
I'm feeling lucky.
He's feeling lucky.
That sounds like you need some therapy.
You have a thought on this, Alex?
No, I think it's a valid point. One of the reasons why it's so hard is because last call lasts forever, and if we didn't, then it would be much easier. And maybe we should try to attack that. Maybe we should try to pull it through last call faster. But because we set guidelines, and we decided that this is our community guidelines, and if we give priority to some pet features that we like, then we probably are not good people. They do have a last call. What Ouija has the same process, it just goes faster.
But I want to push back on that. Like we give explicit depriority to features we don't like.
What?
We explicitly deprioritize features we don't like. As a community, we say, oh, there's ambiguity, and we give other people the ability to say, oh, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
So that seems to be the thing that we use to prioritize our own efforts. But to say it in a context-free way, we happen to think that this is potentially a good idea, but we're not really sure. We're waiting on people to tell us that it's a good idea. Seems a bit too disconnected. Like, we are invested in this question, and we have strong support.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So to summarize, it seems like the ideal standards body is some kind of hybrid that has the consultative nature of the W3C and its patent policy, and the rapid wind-up of what BG. Fair enough?
What about discussing like JCL guidelines?
Good question.
We have a member of technical architecture group and right in this room. Maybe we should ask him this question.
You want the mic?
Alex Russell, Google. I can't speak for the whole tag. That's not a thing I'm empowered to do. And I can't speak for the Blink community. But what I can do is provide color about the architectural implications of potential changes to the web platform. One of the things that I think is positive that we're starting to do is to take draft specifications through a review process as soon as possible, and to attempt to ask them questions which, in my own personal experience, I know have been asked as part of this question, which is, how do the proposals that you're making relate to the rest of the web platform? How do they integrate with JavaScript? What is the way in which you would use this thing to explain other things? And if you can't do that, how would other things explain it? And to provide good layering in the platform. My perspective is that web components would get a clean bill of health from the tag, but it's an exercise we should probably do in the way that we've just done it with web audio and are doing it with a push API now and a couple of the other APIs that are in flight, WebRTC. But in terms of how that builds or reduces consensus inside of the Blink process, that's a question for everybody else here. And I would be happy to schedule some time on the tag calendar to talk with you in a public forum about the design and help use whatever influence the tag has based on an analysis of the design to give it a clean bill of health or send it back for review.
I think that's
That's awesome. Let's do it.
All right. And you've all, how much time have we got? I know you're all waiting to hear about Shadow DOM, right? 5 minutes? Okay, talk really fast.
Okay, let me update the status of Shadow DOM briefly. Yeah. Shadow DOM's specs and implementation are stable in most parts except for CSS styling. Yeah. So Shadow elements, it's hot, but I can fix in a month. Yeah, right. So let me explain what is Shadow DOM briefly. Shadow DOM is a mechanism to provide a functional encapsulation to DOM trees, which means so each element can have 0 or more node trees. So which we call hosts. So each element can be a shadow host, which hosts node trees. So we call it. So web page is now, it's not a single node tree. It's constructed of tree of trees, tree of node trees, right? So in rendering, so nodes from the multiple node trees can be combined into a compose tree. Compose tree is just node tree, just a virtual node tree, right? So in rendering, it can be used. So node inside of shadow trees cannot be seen from the outside tree. That means that's for encapsulation. That can avoid that can avoid such a global CSS rule or some ID conflict. Yeah. That's all. Is there any question?
What's the issue with CSS?
Issue? It's very hot. So, for example, we are discussing if CSS style is defined in shadow trees, its rule can be applied, whether its rule can be applied to its shadow host or not. Yeah, that's all. Well, we are trying to provide more powerful combinator so that outside tree can style a node inside the shadow tree. Yeah. So we are just discussing.
Even more so.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's a problem with it, it's just the things you need to do detail is just not done.
In practice, you want it.
So since this is not implementation, but more like a mental exercise, I'll take the mic. We actually had done now 4 approaches at this problem and fed it to developers, which is primarily Polymer team and the larger community around this. And both have been rejected, or all 4. But every time we're approaching, it's like we're making a stew, and every time it's a little bit more palatable. And I think this time we got it. This time they ate and didn't throw up and didn't turn blue, you know. So.
Is that because this time there's lots of carrots?
No, they're just immune to it now. But it's at the core, it's just an issue of developer ergonomics. How much control you give to the users, and where does the control end? And that's it. And it's just like we invented 2 new combinators because of that. And you know, Tab is going to spec them for us. Yay! And it's just like it's difficult because it's very hard to reconcile this whole new notion of multiple trees in CSS. That's all.
I think for color over time, Shadow DOM has been a journey from something pretty encapsulated to something pretty laissez-faire and open. And the web is just more that way. All right. I guess we have a minute left. Questions? Dimitri, where do you come up with your analogies? Give me an analogy for that.
No comment. This is the secret that I'll take to my grave. But anyway, if you have any more questions, Dominic helpfully has a really nice green sign, says "Ask me about web components." So feel free to approach him. Notice I don't have that sign. No, I'm just kidding. But, you know, can ask me as well. So anyway, and I hope you guys stay as excited about it as you are right now. And, you know, anyway.